Welcome to my series of basketball videos where I'll be comparing various NBA greats against each other. I'm doing this because I find that a lot of the basketball videos comparing players on YouTube are too focused on the big names and sometimes compare players from different positions. Lots of people compare Jordan to LeBron and Kobe to Duncan, for example, due to their similar levels of achievements, but since those players play different positions and have different styles of play, it's not an interesting comparison. In this series, I want to do comparisons between not just more well-known players, but players from days past, in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and the ABA as well, that most modern fans probably do not have too much knowledge about. Also, as much as possible, I want to compare players that play similar positions and/or similar playstyles. To me, that's a more interesting and fruitful comparison. I'll be using 8 different metrics to judge each player. Scoring. This category will be defined by each player's career points per game, peak points per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of scoring titles. Rebounding. This category will be defined by each player's career rebounds per game, peak rebounds per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of rebounding titles. Passing. This category will be defined by each player's career assists per game, peak assists per game, both in regular season and playoffs, and number of assist titles. Efficiency advanced metrics. This category will be defined by each player's career true shooting percentage, PER, and win shares per 48. Reason I use true shooting percentage is because it's more fair to guards. Defense. This category will be defined by each player's all defensive selections, defensive win shares, and defensive player of the year awards. The reason I'm not using blocks, steals, or defensive box plus minus is because I want to compare the achievements of older players that modern fans might not have too much knowledge about, and players in the 1960s and early 1970s do not have these stats tracked. Awards. This category will be defined by all-star appearances, all-NBA selections, MVPs, finals MVPs, and championships as a top 3 player. The reason I have to count championships as a top 3 player on the team is because otherwise you'll get into the situation where, for example, Robert Horry has 7 rings and Karl Malone has 0, and it's not representative of how much better a player is if you weren't a top 3 player on that team contributing to a championship. Also, I'll be including ABA stats and awards and using them equivalent to their respective NBA stats and awards. Also, no All-NBA third team selections are included because All-NBA third teams weren't added until the late 1980s, which is unfair to older players. Playoffs. This category will be defined by how many Eastern Conference Finals or Western Conference Finals and Finals a player has been to, and how many championships they won as a top 3 player on the team. Yes, this is supplementary to the awards category because it also rewards players for making it far in the playoffs, even if they don't necessarily win at all. Totals. This category will be defined by longevity, how many total points, rebounds, assists, and win shares a player has accumulated throughout their career, and rewards a player's durability. After all, a lot of people say the best ability is availability. And of course, this is only going to be my opinion from comparing the available metrics, since I've not watched most of these players live or even been born when some of these players have been playing. And to keep it fair, I'm judging them based on how they did in their own era. There's no comparing what this NBA player played in today's era or the 1960s, none of that. It'll be strictly based on their stats and accomplishments within their own era against that era's competition, which makes the most sense to me. So I hope you guys enjoy this comparison video and hopefully learn something new from it. The 26th episode in the series looks at 2 of the greatest power forwards, both selected to the NBA's 75th anniversary team. Both were known for their scoring, rebounding, and solid defense. Anthony Davis is known as the star big man of the New Orleans Pelicans and teaming up with LeBron James on the LA Lakers. Meanwhile, the Big E, Elvin Hayes, was the premier power forward of the 1970s, playing most of his prime with the Washington Bullets, alongside Hall of Famer Weston Solt. Both players have a championship, albeit had very different careers. But who was the greater player? Let's find out. In the scoring category, it's pretty close as both players were great scorers throughout their career. AD had both a developed perimeter game as well as a post game, and so did Hayes. AD averaged 23.8 points per game for his career, peaking at 28.1 points per game in 2018, and 27.3 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at a monstrous 31.5 points per game in 2015. Hayes averaged 21 points per game for his career, peaking at 28.7 points per game in 1971, and 22.9 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 25.9 points per game in 1974. Although AD had a higher points per game and arguably peaked higher, Hayes also played for much longer. Hayes has a scoring title as well, which he won in his rookie season. Overall, it's pretty close between these two, as both AD and Hayes in their primes are able to score 27 to 28 points per game on any given night, so I'll have to call this category a tie. The rebounding category is interesting as although both men were very good rebounders, Hayes was an all-time rebounder. AD averaged 10.5 rebounds per game for his career, peaking at 12 rebounds a game in 2019, and 10.3 rebounds per game in the playoffs, peaking at 13.4 rebounds per game in 2018. Hayes averaged 12.5 rebounds a game for his career, peaking at a Moses Malone-like 18.1 rebounds per game in 1974, and 13 rebounds a game in the playoffs, peaking at 15.9 in 1974. In addition, he has 2 rebounding titles. While you could say that Hayes played in the 1970s and that the game was played at a faster pace back then, it doesn't fully explain the fact that Hayes was out-rebounding most other players even into his mid-30s. The Big E was just a fantastic rebounder, period. So the advantage will actually go to him. In this category, neither player were great passers as they were not expected to be their team's main playmaker, but AD averaged 2.3 assists per game for his career, peaking at 3.9 per game in 2019, and 2.8 assists per game in the playoffs, peaking at 3.5 per game in 2020. Hayes only averaged 1.8 assists per game for his career, peaking at 3.3 per game in 1972, and 1.9 per game in the playoffs, peaking at 3 per game in 1974. Overall, AD has a slight advantage in passing here, although not by much. In the efficiency and advanced metrics category, it's not very close. AD is one of the most efficient players ever, has one of the highest PERs out of any player, and has an all-time great true shooting percentage and win shares per 48, while Hayes lags behind significantly in all those metrics. So this one easily goes to AD. In the defense category, it's very interesting as most people would think of AD as one of the best defenders and rim protectors of his era in his prime, and his 4-time all-defensive selections prove that. However, Hayes was also a very good defender too, with 2 all-defensive selections and surprisingly a huge lead over AD in defensive win shares. Hayes, like AD, was a very solid player on both sides of the court, so in spite of AD's lead in all defensive selections, I'll actually have to call this category a tie. In the awards category, both players won a championship as the top 2 player in their team, but Hayes has an advantage in All-Star and All-NBA selections, and also played significantly longer. I think AD has a good chance of matching Hayes' All-NBA and All-Star selections by the time he retires though. So overall, I'll actually have to call this category a tie. In the playoffs category, AD really only has 1 season where he experienced significant playoff success and won a championship, but Hayes has been to the finals on 4 separate occasions, so I'll have to give this category to him. In the longevity category, it's not even close. AD is known to be a very injury-prone player, while Hayes is known to be one of the most durable players of all time. The stat totals aren't even close and back this up, so clearly this one will go to the Big E. So when the categories are summed up, AD takes the passing and efficiency categories, while Hayes takes the rebounding, playoffs, and totals categories, with the rest being a tie, giving Elvin Hayes the win. Elvin Hayes is somewhat of an underrated superstar, perhaps because he played in the 1970s. He was the Karl Malone of his era, a power forward who could score with the best of them, be a solid defender, and also have remarkable durability on top of that. He was known as the primary scorer on the Weston Soul-led 1970s Bullets teams. While Anthony Davis at his peak was perhaps a slightly better player, his tendency to be injured is probably the biggest downside of his career. His best season came when he was playing with LeBron James on the LA Lakers, the one season where he was relatively healthy. By the time AD retires, it might be closer, but Elvin Hayes' longevity and productivity makes him hard to beat. Hope you guys enjoyed this comparison. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next comparison video.